Hey everybody, welcome to the Addiction Unlimited podcast, where you get to learn everything you want to know about addiction and recovery. I'm your host, Angela Pugh, co-founder of Kansas City Recovery, life coach, and recovering alcoholic. To learn more about me, you can listen to episode 0 on your podcast app or find us on the web at addictionunlimited.com. Hey everybody, welcome to the Addiction Unlimited podcast. Angela Pugh here. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Our guest today is fantastic, as usual. I know I say that on every episode, but I feel like it's really true. Sha Sparks is with us today, and she is the Chief Excitement Officer at Sparks of Hope. And Sha is a coach and a consultant for people who want to learn to communicate effectively, not only in life, right? Like she's life coaching, but also in business. It's all about communication. You guys know I love communication. It's something I'm so passionate about. And Sha is also an author, a speaker, and she has her own podcast called The Power of Investing in People. And we're going to hear more about that in a few minutes. And as you guys know, you can go to addictionunlimited.com/Sha, S-H-A, and you'll find everything in her show notes, all of her contact information, her book, her podcast, all of that stuff will be in her show notes. addictionunlimited.com/Sha, S-H-A. So let's welcome Sha to the pod. Hi, Sha. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Angela. I'm very excited to be here and very excited to be connected with you.
I know, right? I'm so glad. A lot of my listeners know that I'm like an Instagram stalker, and I find so many people on Instagram. I love Instagram, but what a great way to connect with people that typically you wouldn't even know about. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And we're in the same neighborhood. I mean,
right,
who would have thought?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming. Okay. So tell my listeners a little bit more about you and what you do. Just fill in some blanks that maybe I missed.
Okay. So I am a communication and mindset coach. What I do is I help people communicate effectively in their relationships and within. And what that means is that they might have a spouse relationship or a parent or a child or even their coworker or boss. Really dive in and figure out how to communicate better within themselves, and then they can communicate better with other people.
That's so important. I feel like most people recognize they don't necessarily communicate well, but not very many people actually do anything to fix it. Like
right.
It's the number one thing in my coaching practice. Like even when people come to see me as a coach for totally unrelated issues, somehow that almost always comes up, right? And you're right, whether it's in their personal relationship with a spouse or significant other, or it's in relationships in the workplace. Like everybody struggles with communication, but not very many people are actually taking action to fix it or get better at it.
Right. And on my own journey, I figured out it was all stemming from childhood and all stems from that negative self-talk that we are taught somewhere along the line, and we've picked it up and believe it is true. And most of it is lies.
Right.
So we take that forward and we use that in our communication with other people. And then you're kind of putting a filter because that's not really who you are. So the work that I've done on myself, I now teach other people how to do it. And it's really just a great way to peel away the layers and heal.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So I learned a lot of this in my sobriety, right? Of course, because as everybody knows, being an alcoholic was the catalyst for me, right? That was the event in my life that made me really pay attention to the growth that I needed to do and the work that I needed to do. And that doesn't mean that addiction is the only catalyst, right? Like plenty of people have other catalysts. They have other things that they go through that are equally significant and important. For me, that was just my catalyst. But it was great. I say all the time, being an alcoholic is the best thing that ever happened to me because it is the thing that made me pay attention. And it's the thing that made me really get committed to my life and becoming a better person. It's so good when you have those skills and you really put a lot of energy into learning those skills for yourself. It is a fantastic opportunity to teach other people.
Right. Well, I kind of feel like that was why I'm here. That was my purpose, is to learn what I went through, what I wronged, what I did wrong, how I was taught wrong, and then help other people out of their situation.
Right.
For so many instances, I started drinking at a young age. I got a DUI at 16, which saved my life.
Right.
And I didn't quit drinking until I was 23, but I did that only because I was in an abusive relationship and I was the codependent person and had to take care of him because he was an alcoholic. So again, now I went through an abusive relationship to help other women get out of their abusive, or men too. I mean,
Right.
women are abusive
Sure.
too, to get out of their abusive relationships, to help with their addiction, to help with that codependency. Myself, so I say I'm an overcomer, because I've overcome abuse, addiction, being a bully and being bullied, depression and low self-worth, and even anger. I didn't realize how angry I was until one day it just kind of occurred to me out of the blue that I was angry. And not just angry as in, oh, I'm mad at a situation because someone made me mad. No, this is a deep-rooted fire that is in your soul, that I was angry at the world and everybody in it because of what had happened to me throughout my life. And so I was just kind of sitting with that anger one day. Sorry, I'm not trying to take you off track, but
No, this is brilliant.
I love talking about this. So I was on this track of just kind of figuring out where I was, like I said, peeling away the layers. And it all started with journaling, actually. I started journaling just random thoughts, and that's when I figured out, hey, I'm really angry. So what am I going to do with that? And I'm also a hairstylist, too. And as people would come see me to get their haircut, they would say, so how are you doing today? I'm like, well, I'm good, and I'm angry. And they're like, oh, should you be cutting my hair? I mean, you have sharp instruments to my head. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine, actually. I said, I'm just aware that you can be both, right? You can be having a good day and you can be angry at what has gone on. And so I knew that at some point I would deal with that anger. I just didn't know what yet. And so one day I was driving to work and I was listening to Christian talk radio. And this pastor, as soon as I turned on the station, the pastor said, do you have a list of people that you're angry at? And I went, oh my God, that's what I need, a list. So I turn off the radio and I'm driving down the road and I grab a fast food napkin and, unfold it the 16 ways it's folded up, right? And a pen. And as I'm driving, I'm literally like writing all these names on this napkin. I fill the entire napkin, front and back, with every person that I was angry at, that I didn't even realize I was angry. Kind of like a, not just like, oh, I'm upset because they did one thing. It was more like, no, they did one thing and I never forgave them.
Right.
But I didn't see that I didn't forgive them. I just knew I was still holding that grudge. Oh, and I was holding points, right? You hold points towards the other person. Oh, that one time they did that one thing to me. I'm not going to trust them 100% anymore. And so, again, I didn't know what to do with it. I just sat with this list for a while. And because I had practiced journaling, I was really deciding that I was going to journal about each one of these people, but I just needed to find the time. So I found a day, and it was literally an entire day. I knew tears would be happening, so I just prepared myself to go through this whole day. And I took each person and I wrote their name, and I said exactly what I wanted to tell them. The cuss words and all, the fuck you and forget you and I can't believe you did this to me and all. And then I also said, I forgive you. Please forgive me. And then I asked God to forgive me for holding on to this anger. And I literally went through each person. And if I had to guess, there may have been between 25 and 30 people on there, from little things from childhood that I had no idea that I was really holding on to grudge.
Right.
And once I did that through every person and forgave them and asked God to forgive me, the anger disappeared.
Isn't that amazing? So, in 12 steps, we do a similar process. And what I think is so fascinating in your story is that you had the wherewithal to do this yourself and that you really stayed committed to it. Because again, a lot of people want to change. A lot of people want to be different. A lot of people want to feel differently. They want to behave differently, make choices differently. They want to have different reactions to things and maybe not be so angry or quick-tempered or short or condescending. Condescending was something I dealt with a lot. I'm not a person to scream and yell and raise my voice, but I will shred you in a few sentences and your head will just spin. It happens so fast and so efficiently. So that's one that I have always had a struggle with. So people can recognize that we have these things, right? And we can recognize that we want it to be different. But not many people are really carving out a piece of time to really go through some of these exercises and get that stuff out from inside of you. I love that you had just the inclination to do that and then to follow through with it and to not start it and not finish, but to start it and complete the process so that you actually have the reward. That's amazing.
Well, thank you. You talked about condescending. I was also condescending and sarcastic. And I was at this women's conference and the speaker said, sarcasm is anger in a clown suit. And ever since I heard that, I was like, wow, does that make so much sense? And so now, when I first heard that, my family was very sarcastic. We didn't share feelings. We didn't talk about, I love you. We, made fun of you in a sarcastic way, that kind of thing. And so when I would get that sarcasm from them, I would ask them, okay, so tell me, what is it that you're really angry about? And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm not angry. And so it's so amazing that once I healed myself and started changing the way I spoke to my family, they started to heal as well.
Right.
And that's the amazing thing about the healing process. And that's the reason why I started the podcast, the power of investing in people, because you really have to invest in yourselves first, and then you can invest in someone else. And then the best thing is when you see them transform, then you also get more boost of confidence in order to keep going on your own journey.
Right. It fuels you. You fuel your own fire. Yeah.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay. So how does all of this fit into your journey of sobriety?
So I started drinking. The first time I got drunk, I guess I'll say, was at 11. But when I was a little kid, I used to sit on my dad's lap and take sips out of his beer. Because, hey, that's what you're doing. Your dad's home at the end of the day at work, and you're sitting on his lap, and he has a beer. And I'm like, hey, can I take a sip? Well, I remember distinctly I could taste it right now if I think about it. I think it was Old Milwaukee Best, so it was disgusting, right? In your adult life, it's disgusting. But, as a kid, you're like, oh, what is this?
Nothing but the best.
Right. And so, I remember tasting that and going, oh, I like that. And then I remember giggling and laughing. And my mom's like, okay, you can't have any more. But I was probably 3, 4, 5 years old in that age range. And looking back, I can see where my brain went, oh, I'm going to have to like this. And then throughout the years, it wasn't really thought about again, I would say, until I was just finished my 6th grade year. My oldest brother had graduated high school. We had a kegger to celebrate. And while all my family and all of his friends are, celebrating with drinking the keg, I break out 2 bottles of wine. Again, the best, Boone's Farm. And, I'm 11 years old and I'm drink 2 bottles of wine. And I really, again, looking back at the time, I didn't realize, but looking back, I could really see that that's where the devil started really messing with me and really tearing me down. And within probably 6 months, I had broke my knee, and the pain was so excruciating. And at the time, there was only one painkiller at the time. I think now there's hundreds of them. Right. And with the opioid epidemic, I'm glad I didn't go down that route.
Right.
But there was such a huge problem with that the medication actually made me nauseous. And so I was vomiting constantly because of the pain medication. So the option my mom gave me was just stop taking it. Well, I don't know if you've ever broken a bone, but it is a horrible, horrible pain, especially in your knee. And so I was almost bedbound because of the pain and I just vomited for 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And so I grew up in the middle of Iowa on a farm. So it's very isolating. It's very cold. It was over winter, and you're in 7th grade at this point. So your friends are your defining people in your life, and you're not around them. So it was a really depressing time for me. And I mean depressing where I literally wanted to die. It was almost like I would pray and yet pray to die.
Yes. I can relate to that so well. Yes.
Yeah. So it's not like you were praying to the devil, but it's almost like you were just praying all the horrible things that you were thinking, like just take it because I can't stand this anymore.
I just wanted it to end.
Yes.
And I don't even know, so I don't even know that I was like praying to die necessarily. I just wanted all of the pain and anguish and overwhelm. I just wanted it to stop.
Yes, exactly. So that was 11. And then by 14, started smoking cigarettes. By 15, I was drinking daily. And not just a little bit daily. I was drinking a lot daily. And then the second semester of my sophomore year, it was a 6-pack after school every day, a case of beer on Friday night, a case of beer again on Saturday night. And all of the symptoms, I guess you would say, of an alcoholic was happening to me. I was having body shakes and dry heaves and things like that. And something kind of shifted where it slowed down after I got out of school for that year. It slowed down. It didn't stop. It slowed down.
Right.
And so then the following year, I was 16. I remember many, many, many times being intoxicated and driving home and praying the whole time, right? Like, God, just let me make it home. I'll quit drinking tomorrow, that whole thing. And of course, that didn't happen at the time. And so I went to a party and I was not feeling like really drinking a whole lot. So I may have had 3 beers, which is at that point in my life was kind of not a lot.
Not a
right?
lot, right.
And so I was okay to drive. I didn't have to do the whole prayer thing. And so I came to the stop sign and I realized I forgot my purse at my friend's house. So I turn around and I go back and then something said, oh, reach under your seat. And so, I reached under my seat and I had put it under there. So I go back to that same stop sign. Well, I thought I had come to a complete stop. I guess what I did was what they call a rolling California stop. So you don't stop completely.
Right.
And I go, and that's when I see the lights. And now I'm getting pulled over. And I'm like, oh, my God, what do I do? I've been drinking. How is this going to go down? Ironically, my dad had also been out drinking because it was his birthday. So I'm thinking, please call my mom. Don't make sure my dad doesn't come pick me up because he might get pulled over at the same time. However, no, he came and picked me up and we went to the police station and I got fingerprinted and all that. Got arrested.
Did it scare you?
We'll talk about, being sober in a quick second. I was sober in a quick second and terrified. My worst fear was, I'm 16. Am I going to put me in a cell with adults?
Right.
Because I've seen movies. I was kind of scared. But because my dad was there, my concern was he'd been drinking. What if he gets in trouble too? What if they breathalyze him too? What's going to happen?
Right.
Like my thought wasn't necessarily only on me. It was also on him and what's going to happen. And then on the ride home, he drove me home in silence, and I thought, for sure, this is it. Like, he's just going to rip me a new one. He's going to yell at me, whatever. And he didn't do that. And so I went to bed. The next morning, I remember just waking up, lying in bed, going, okay, God, I get it. This is what being humble means. You have brought me to my knees. Okay. I have screwed up my life this far. I'm done. It's yours. Do with it what you want. Now, does that mean I was great after that? No. But that was, I think...
It's never quite that simple.
It's never like the movies. You wake up and you're in a different house and a different... Yeah, it's never like that. What's interesting is that was just the first step. To just say that out loud was the first step for me. And so when I got down to the kitchen, my mom was sitting there and I was like, good morning. And she was so mad at me. And I said, are you mad? And she goes, yes. And I said, okay. And how mad is Dad? And she goes, he's very mad too. And I said, okay. And then he had come home from the store and he handed me a case of cough drops. And I said, what's this for? And he said, if you get pulled over again, you need to put one of these in your mouth before you get the breathalyzer test. Because the guys at the coffee shop told me it would change the breathalyzer. And
wow, he's giving you a solution.
Right. And again, at the time, I remember thinking at 16, this isn't probably how you should have handled that. And it's so weird because I think as a rebellious teenager, you're thinking, I don't want rules. Why would I want rules?
Right.
But the truth is we all need boundaries.
Yes, for sure.
And especially at that age, I needed the boundaries, and I did the opposite. When my dad said, you're home at midnight, I was like, oh yeah, watch me, 5 a.m. I was pulling in minutes before he would wake up. So he tried and I didn't pay attention. And I later realized it was because he had his own stuff. And him and my mom were fighting constantly. So it was a lot of stuff. Right after that, well, I shouldn't say right after, a couple of months after that DUI, he actually left my mom. And he told me. He didn't tell her. He told me. And I had to tell her.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of responsibility for a young person.
Well, again, I don't think he understood that.
Right, right.
And I can say all this because I just lost my dad a couple months ago to cancer, to 2 types of cancer. And we had just an amazing clearing of relationship the last probably 5-6 years, that he knows how I felt and everything. And we've talked about what he was going through, and he was still not able to tell, still not able to communicate what he was going through, which is why I became such a communication coach. Because think about that as a parent, telling your child, you know what, I'm going through some stuff too. I get it. Let me just put my stuff aside for a moment and focus on you. And what is it that you need? Do you need me to love you? I didn't get that. I didn't get love from my parents my entire life. So yes, love me. But even if they had asked me that, I didn't have the tools for myself to say, yes, I need love. In fact, I had learned to build such a high wall around me that I say I'm in the castle, in the fortress, in the tower with a moat around the castle. I was so high up, you know. So that's part of the reason why I became a coach, because it was like, wow, just being able to say what it is that's going on in your head to the other person sometimes clears the air.
Totally. And it's its own sort of bonding experience too. And what I've found in coaching is most of the time, I feel like people get afraid to have those sort of difficult conversations, largely because they don't know what to say. You know, like I cannot tell you how often I'm sitting in a session with somebody and we're just talking about how to phrase things and given, like I always tell my clients, I'm like, well, let's get you some good one-liners, you know, just one-liners that you can have in your pocket. When you need them, you can use them so you don't get fearful because you don't know what to say. And then working on all the things around that, right? In that when you are communicating with somebody, you need to be really patient too. And you need to listen to what they're saying. And one of my solo podcasts a few weeks ago was about, I talked about active listening and how important that is and how valuable that is to the person that you're in communication with. And how it allows them to feel valuable and validated in what they're saying when you're actively listening and really hearing their message, not just their words. But it's so important to know that you have words and to figure out what those words are for you, because it's not cookie cutter. We don't all speak the same way and communicate the same way. You have to know what your comfortable words are and how to use them appropriately, and then how to sit patiently and pause and be quiet and allow the other person space too.
You're spot on with all of that. The active listening I want to talk on. But first, we're not taught how to be vulnerable.
For sure. You're taught how to not be vulnerable.
Right. And that was my biggest thing. I couldn't even pronounce the word vulnerable. I would stumble over it because I was like, there's no way I want to be vulnerable. Because in my head, I had equated that with being weak.
Of course.
And
yeah.
I was like, no, I'm not weak. I'm a strong person, blah, blah, blah. But what I have found, again, in my own experience, is once I became vulnerable and was able to share what it is that I was feeling, what it is that I needed to say to that other person, it actually gave me confidence.
Yes, absolutely. It's very empowering.
And it's also interesting that when you're vulnerable, it almost taps into something in that other person to become an active listener. But if you're the same as you are every day, day in and day out, they tune you out because they have their own tape player or CD player or MP3, whatever, right. Their own podcast going in their head, you know?
Whatever it is today.
Yeah. And so they have their own thing going in their head that they're not listening to you. They're just waiting for you to stop talking so they can tell you their information.
Right. That's exactly what I talked about on that podcast, was the difference in actively listening and just waiting for your turn to speak. And when you're formulating in your head, when your focus is going to formulating what you're going to say and how you're going to defend yourself, you're not hearing the other person at all. I love too that in talking about healing that relationship with your father, and to me, those opportunities only came as a result of my sobriety. Mm-hmm. And not only sobriety in quitting drinking and getting my own head clear, but in the recovery part of that, of really growing up myself and really learning myself from the inside out and taking responsibility for myself and learning how to advocate for myself, but also learning how to understand that I play a role in all of the quote unquote negative things that happen in my life. I play a role in that too. And being able to understand that and then take all of those things into my damaged relationships and to be able to start healing them, because then I had new skills. Recovery gave me all of these new skills and tools to use in these uncomfortable situations, and skills to reconcile my own trauma and my own damage and my own walls and inability to be vulnerable, right? All of that I got as a result of my recovery. I never would have gotten to that space otherwise.
I agree. I took a self-development seminar back in when I was 21. Now, I didn't quit drinking until I was 23, and I was really focused on the other alcoholic in my life most of the time. But one of the things that I got out of that seminar was to give up expectations.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And one of the things I had started to do when I got sober was to really give up expectations of my dad and let him off the hook of not being the perfect dad.
Right.
Because I think as children, we look at our parents for everything, right? So of course, it's natural to think that they would never do wrong. But when you figure it out that they have their own stuff
totally
that they're going through, then you see them in a different light. You can take, like you said, take responsibility for your own actions in that relationship. And then you can do something about it.
Right.
And you can handle it differently because you're looking at it from a different perspective.
What has been your path to sobriety? Most of my listeners know I'm a 12-step person, right? I'm super open to every path to recovery, but I always like to talk about this because, a lot of my goal is I want people to do something rather than nothing, right? Mm-hmm. So if you don't like 12 steps, cool, don't like 12 steps. I don't care. Do something though, right? If you have an issue, do something. So what has been your path?
Well, when I was 16, because of the DUI, I was court appointed that I went through AA. And then my school found out, and because I was in extracurricular activities, it was again required that I went through AA. As far as I know, we were never offered actual AA classes. Okay. So I see the definition, the distinction between the two now. Yeah. Gotcha.
It's so, we will shut down so quickly too. As addicted people, I talk about we have a personality, right? That is largely not so charming in certain ways, but we are pretty rebellious, right? Like we want to push back. We like to push back. We like to be obstinate. It's just who we are. We don't necessarily do it on purpose. It's just how things tend to come out for a lot of us. So the moment I feel like whoever might be trying to teach me or guide me, the moment I feel like they are not doing it themselves, they lose all credibility in my eyes. And I just had this experience recently, and I'm not going to say the name of the show. It has been publicized to a certain degree, but I just don't even want to give it any life. But there's a show on television, and it's a couple of people, and one of the people on the show, I've only watched one episode, and it was so painfully obvious that this person was on drugs that I feel shocked that they even aired it, you know, because it was so obvious as this person was talking, and it was so obvious the person was high. And I was like, why did they even put this on? Wow. Because especially any addicted person on the freaking planet is going to recognize that person is high. And to me, what it did, it kind of ruined the show, because on one hand, I really sort of appreciate what they're doing, and they're kind of doing it vigilante style, which I really appreciate, but it just lost all credibility to me. And I don't even know who films the show, but they don't have any credibility with me either. So, but yeah, how would you follow the lead of that person in that state of mind?
Well, and you're 16, so how do you know to even say, oh, well, you're probably shouldn't be teaching this class. I mean, you don't, right? And you're in a one-on-one environment, so you really don't know. So, yeah, so what was interesting is that I learned the 12 principles, and it was like, it didn't really apply to me. I mean, that's kind of how I looked at it.
Sure.
It wasn't until when I quit drinking, I was 23, and I was with the alcoholic. He said to me, we had just been out the night before, you know, had been drinking. He said to me as soon as we woke up, you do really stupid things when you drink. And I said, that's it, I'm done. What's interesting is he was actually projecting, because he's actually the one who does stupid things, of course. For me, at that moment, when he told me that, I went to the refrigerator to get a glass of water, and I opened the refrigerator and saw beer, and I was like, okay, beer, I can never have another one of you again. I'm done.
I love that.
And I am lucky. I've never desired it. I've never craved it. It's around me all the time. My friends drink, and it just never processes in my brain for me to have another one. And
I appreciate so much that that's your experience too, because that was my experience as well. And I didn't know if that would last a long time. You know what I mean? When I quit drinking, I really did not struggle. I really was like, I'm done. I don't want any part of alcohol anymore. Now I have to learn how to live and grow up. Because what I recognized is I could not cope with life. I could not deal with my problems or my issues. And I knew that. So for me, putting down the drink was just the first step to figuring out how to grow up and become a regular human.
Totally agree. I realized that it was a mask, right? So I'm kind of drink to avoid whatever's really going on. Okay, so I'm depressed today. I'm angry today. I'm mad at my boyfriend. Whatever it was, that's what I realized that alcohol was for me. It was the mask. And looking back, like I said, I remember at that point at 23, looking back and remembering that the devil talked to me when I was having that knee pain and that depression and suicidal thoughts. And I remember at 15, drinking daily, looking in myself in the mirror, literally before I'm going to school, drinking, putting my makeup on, looking directly in my eye and hearing the devil talk to me, like, keep drinking. It's okay. You can keep doing it. It's no big deal. And I remember thinking, how I listened to that voice. And to me, that's almost like the voice of fear. Mm-hmm. Instead of listening to the voice of reason, the voice of God, the voice of love, the voice of light, whatever you want to call it. But to me, it was definitely a distinction between the devil and God. And when I told the beer goodbye, I was literally like, okay, that's it. I'm done. And since then, I actually have been given a Celebrate Recovery book. Celebrate Recovery Bible. And I went through the 12 steps and that, just reading it and going through it in my own life, just by myself. Instead of doing it with a group, I did that. And that was really helpful.
Yeah.
And I can't recall if that was the time when I figured out I was angry and I made that forgiveness list. I just knew it all kind of happened at around the same time frame. When you're an alcoholic and you don't want to admit you're an alcoholic, you say you have a drinking problem. So that's really what I called myself. Like I had a problem with drinking.
Right.
And when I saw my boyfriend, I was like, he's the alcoholic. He's drinking every day. He's doing this. He's doing that. And it didn't really shift for me until he was abusive, verbally, physically, mentally. But again, you know, I'm scrappy and rebellious. So of course I'm going to fight back and everything else. So I never saw myself as a victim. I just saw myself like, I'm just waiting to die. So I'm just going to live my life. This is normal, and I'm just going to wait to die till he kills me or something else happens to me. I'm going to get cancer because all this crap is happening to me, and then I'll be done. And then he was in a car accident, and he actually hit a tree at the church that I had been going to, and hit it so hard where he hit his head on the tree. He had brain damage. He was in a coma. And as far as I know now, he's in a nursing home. But at that moment, when that happened, I really had to step back and go, okay, so now how can I only take care of me?
Right.
Because I have my entire life been taking care of other people. You know, if you remember, I said, I'm worried about my dad getting when I'm in the DUI.
Right.
Than me. And so I literally within the first week started counseling with a great Christian counselor, probably a couple of times that first couple of weeks. Because I knew my entire life, I knew I was messed up. I felt that at probably 5 or 6 years old and knew that through my entire 20s. Now I'm in my mid-30s at this point, and I'm like, I know that I was messed up. How can I heal that? How can I figure it out? And when I would say that to people, they were like, you're not messed up.
Right.
And I'm like, but you don't understand the crap that has happened to me that I need to heal from and figure out how to be okay going forward. And so once I said that, they were like, okay, yeah, I get that. So I started counseling, started reading books, started really diving in. That was 9 years ago. And I really started diving into what is emotional intelligence, what is boundaries, what is, coaching.
All my favorite things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Codependency no more, addiction recovery, all of those things. What is that? And how did that affect me? And it's interesting when you take responsibility. I love that word. When you take responsibility for your own life, you're like, why didn't anybody tell me this before?
Yes, for sure.
But the funny thing is,
why isn't there a class in school about emotional intelligence?
Right. But if they had taught me that, I wouldn't have learned it because I was that kid that sat in the back that was a troublemaker, right? So you have to go through all of this crap in order to get to the point where you're like, okay, now I get it. Now I'm changing.
It does. It takes what it takes for all of us. I could have quit drinking earlier. I knew I needed to quit drinking earlier than I did. I could have, I guess, but I just wasn't ready. The message wasn't clear enough. I wasn't absolutely convinced on any level that I couldn't do it myself, right? Like it just takes what it takes. And, my bottom was pretty crazy too, but it took something that serious to get me to pay attention and take my recovery that serious. That's really what it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so good. Okay, my last question, my favorite question. What is your favorite thing about being a sober person?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked this because I was hoping to talk about it. So it's clarity. First of all, the relationship that I have with God is the person who I worship. So the relationship that I have with God is so dynamic and so clear, I think, because I'm sober. It is almost, I call it downloads. There are times where I feel like I'm journaling, and as soon as I might write him I write him a letter. That's my journals. And as soon as I write him a question, like, should I be doing this? What direction should I go? It's like, I have an answer immediately. And because I have practiced this for so many years, probably 20 years now, I know it's not from me. I know it's not my ego in the way. I know it's straight from God. So I would have to say clarity for sure.
I love having well, again, for me, it just feels very empowering to have that clarity and to know that now I know how to actively participate in my life to create the life I want. I know how to orchestrate my daily life and how I want to make decisions and the type of person I want to be making those decisions to get to the end goal, right? To be the person that I want to be. And I can't behave the way I used to behave. If I want to have a different life, I have to behave differently, right? I have to do things differently. And sobriety allows me that opportunity, allows me to see that and to be able to really orchestrate it and be strategic about it. It's such a blessing.
Yeah, I do want to add one of the questions that I found myself asking that I love is when you're looking at the end of what you want for your life, you have to ask yourself, what is it that I don't know that I need to know in order to move forward? And once you start asking yourself that, I think it just really opens up your next step.
Right. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this podcast with me. This has been amazing. We could talk forever. I mean, everybody knows I can talk forever for sure. But again, you guys, you can go to addictionunlimited.com/Sha, S-H-A, and all the show notes will be there, Shay's contact information, and let me know if you have any questions. Of course, you can leave me a voice message on the homepage of addictionunlimited.com. Thank you so much, Shay.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This has been an honor and a pleasure and very fun.
Absolutely. And you guys have a great week. We'll see you next time.
You've reached the end of another great episode of the Addiction Unlimited podcast. Candid and honest conversation about addiction and recovery. Be sure to visit us at addictionunlimited.com to join the conversation and access show notes and links to everything we talked about. Love this episode? Please take 30 seconds to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes to help us improve and give you the information you want. Thanks for listening. See you next week.